Hello there. I thought we'd take a look at what's going on in Europe, considering everybody's very concentrated on the US with all of the changes Trump's bringing and how quickly he's moving right now. And what we have is not good news. Europe seems to be moving, well, the leadership seems to be moving ever more to the left, becoming more authoritarian over time, whilst the population seems to be rejecting the same agendas. So this is from the European Conservative. A Polish MEP, member of the European Parliament, faces 3 years in prison for liking a tweet. He didn't even tweet it himself, he didn't retweet it, he just liked it. Liking a tweet now is punishable with 3 years in prison. So, Patrick Jaki from the Law and Justice Party is beginning his special trial in Poland after liking a Twitter post back in 2018 that showcased real security footage of migrant criminals. And that was it. The tweet didn't say, well, we need to do something about them. It didn't say deport them. It didn't say commit violence against them. All it did was show you actual real-world footage of migrants committing crimes. The implication, of course, is, well, this is what you are importing. These guys are overwhelmingly involved in such matters beyond the local populace, percentage-wise, meaning they are overrepresented in crime by a lot. And this is something that government statistics has proven time and time again, and I can say it because I don't live in Europe, luckily, which is something that I would not have said 10 years back. Funnily enough, it would have seemed completely ridiculous to say 10-20 years back. But nowadays, Europe has become so censorious and so authoritarian that simply pointing out government statistics if you are on the wrong side of the political aisle can indeed result in being imprisoned. Now, the trial of the co-chair of the European Conservative and Reformist Group, which is this Patrick Jaki guy, comes against the backdrop of Polish PM Donald Tusk's entire Liberal government becoming the subject of an official probe over a suspected coup d'etat last week, due to its blatant rule of law violations. Now, both of them are Polish. Donald Tusk is the current Prime Minister who is persecuting this Patrick Jaki MEP and his entire party, the Law and Justice Party, basically, for this video. This video is, I believe, basically some sort of election video made by the Law and Justice Party. So it's essentially them making the case, we think migrants are bringing more crime into our country, so we'll try and have less migrants. Essentially, that's the entire shtick. And Donald Tusk basically persecuting them, and now he's being investigated along with his entire government for blatant rule of law violations, such as ignoring high-level judicial rulings, taking over public institutions, and unlawfully persecuting the conservative opposition. Something that Jackie's case perfectly illustrates. This should not surprise anyone. We have seen two-tier policing in Europe. We have seen trying to ban the opposition parties like in Germany. We have seen that disagreeing with the government mainstream narrative is punishable in many ways. Financially, just going to prison, having your name ruined, being banned, being debanked. They have a lot of ways to deter you from politically engaging in debate and putting across your opinion. Despite the fact that your opinion is not violent, despite the fact that you are simply following through the protocols of a democracy and disagreeing with them on the issues. Mind you, usually the positions held by these dangerous far-right extremists are essentially what the left used to believe 20 years ago. So these far-right extremists are just behind-the-time lefties, if you will. And that's enough. Send them to prison, to debank them, to ban them from everywhere. And if you disagree with the measures taken by the left, even if you agreed with them on policy, if you disagreed with the means they used to achieve their goals, that also will result in you being declared far-right extremist. So there's no winning. You either submit to the government and the progressive cult, or you are an enemy of the state, really. And that's the way it is in Europe right now. Now, the trial came to international attention after ex-owner Elon Musk reposted an interview with Jackie on Tuesday, February 11th, calling the prosecutor's request for a 3-year sentence for liking a social media post insane, and adding, "Thank the Lord that America has the First and Second Amendments." Well, yes, quite. You know, you can't defend the first without the second. Anyway, thanks to Musk, the short clip amassed over 8 million views on X in less than 24 hours. In a subsequent video that Jackie posted in reply, he showcased the 2018 clip that was originally published by the then ruling Law and Justice Party, PIS, and asked Musk to keep supporting free speech and all people who do not want a world where you are put in jail for liking a tweet. You can see the clip right here. I'll show you some of it.
My name is Patryk Jaki. I am a member of the European Parliament from Poland, from European Conservative Fraction. In 2018, I liked a video on the X platform that showed the real scenes of violence of illegal migrants in Europe. See, it is all about the exact scenes. The left in Europe called this liking hate speech, and today vote to strip me of my immunity. They demand 3 years in prison for me for showing the truth about illegal migration.
Well, there you have it. Members of the European Parliament have a certain amount of immunity, and they stripped him of his immunity so that he can be persecuted in his home country of Poland. And they basically demand 3 years in prison, and they're also trying to, how to put it, remove him from his position in the European Union. I don't understand if it's to remove him as an MEP or just from the position as what was it? The co or vice? Yeah, the co-chair of the European Conservative and Reformist group. But anyway, they are definitely trying to remove him from power as much as possible for the great crime of opposing criminal migrants, I suppose. In parallel, the Tusk government on Monday suspended Mikhail Ostrowski, the country's deputy prosecutor general, for launching the coup d'etat investigation into its members, despite him acting at the request of the Constitutional Tribunal, Poland's highest constitutional judicial body. So essentially, the Tusk government is trying to suspend the country's deputy prosecutor general for launching the investigation into itself at the request of the highest constitutional judicial body. Think about it this way. If Donald Trump tried to suspend investigators for investigating him and his government at the behest of the Supreme Court, what would you think about that? The mainstream media would go crazy. They would say that this is absolutely the destruction of democracy. They would have people in the streets everywhere. There would be violence. Basically, that is happening in Poland right now, except in reverse, with the left-wing parties being the ones that are suspending the investigators, and nobody is talking about it in mainstream media because they're all bought and paid for shit. If you are on the left but not into the cult, then you will be ostracized and forced into the right. We've seen that happen to so many people: Dave Rubin, Andy No, Tulsi Gabbard, of course, RFK Jr., even Trump himself, even Elon Musk. They have all started as lefties and moved to the right over time. In fact, even the YouTubers I usually watch, like V or Sargon, started as center-left and moved slowly to the right, becoming right-wingers over time. Even Tim Pool used to be the milquetoast fence-sitter, mostly leaning left again. It's just Joe Rogan. Everyone that the right has right now that is in a position of power or fame or influence used to be a lefty. Why is that? Simple, because the true right-wingers have been banned from everywhere. They have been ostracized. So what we have left is the reasonable left-wingers who remained after the initial purges, rose to prominence because they were the most sensible voices left on any platform, on any media, in the public domain, and then they became the bearers, the standard bearers for any opposition to the craziness of the left. You don't like people being sent to prison over liking a social media post that doesn't advocate violence, doesn't include any lies, just has real-world footage of events that happened, clearly you must be a far-right conspiracy lunatic theorist. Okay. We saw how that worked for you. It didn't. We see that if we move over for a moment, here it is. Swiss voters lead the way on rejecting emission curbs. So it was a set of strict emission limits that was voted down on the polls on Sunday. Switzerland's Young Greens, who unsurprisingly brought the proposals forward, complained that defenders of the status quo had been victorious. And as you can see, it's basically about 69.8% voting against. So what you have is a complete loss. None of the country's 26 cantons voted in favor of this proposal, this climate proposal. Why? Because of economic concerns. It's interesting. It says here that Brussels is more likely to pay attention to those Swiss lawmakers desperately searching for other ways to legislate for the environment, and as issues surrounding the EU's Green Deal show, against competitiveness. That's been shown so many times. The entire green movement is against cheap and affordable energy. It's trying to make you impoverished. It's against nuclear energy, which the newer generation of are much cleaner, much safer, very energy efficient, very dependable. On the other hand, they try to make you go to solar and wind. From what we've seen, solar and wind are not dependable. In bad weather, they basically stop functioning. They tend to create a lot of pollution as they deteriorate over time. They don't have a long lifespan, and they are so problematic, expensive, and inefficient that no country can rely on these and be competitive against any country that does not. And incidentally, the countries that do try to transform their energy sector to having wind and solar are a very tiny fraction of carbon emissions worldwide. If you see, China and India are the overwhelming majority, and countries like the UK, for example, are like 1%. So there is no justification at all for this movement, and they are only trying to make it worse. Basically, they are trying to, how is it? Yeah, reduce greenhouse gases emitted through consumption to 10% of the 2018 levels within the next decade. There's no way you can reduce that much carbon without destroying quality of life and the economy for everyday people. They don't care because they will not be affected. They are funded through the government and through the large corporations like BlackRock and Vanguard. Social Democrat Linda De Ventura said the vote was not a statement against climate protection. You're wrong. While the Greens accused their opponents of scaremongering by emphasizing economic issues rather than planetary protection. Ah yes, the people who are scaremongering everyone into believing that doomsday is just around the corner if we don't just stop living, you know, the carbon they want to reduce is us. Yeah, they are now accusing you of scaremongering. Swiss professor Stefan Legge said that proponents of the measures might actually have been happily expecting defeat, because even if they fail in a vote, this way you put a topic on the agenda. Switzerland is already tied to net zero by 2050 commitments, although this latest vote could suggest these will soon come under heavier scrutiny too. Hopefully. Of course, being on YouTube, I must admit that clearly climate change is very real, and therefore it is a present danger to life on the planet or something. But all the same, I am very happy that the Swedes have rejected these proposals, which in my opinion are going to destroy humans' quality of life. They're going to destroy the economy, and they are part of an effort to essentially immiserate and impoverish the working class, the middle class, and return to some sort of new feudalism where we're all serfs. I honestly try to listen to what is said in Davos and in the UN. They actually publish their own videos. Of course, if you try to be too aggressive in criticizing them, then something bad might happen to your YouTube channel. But you can listen to everything that's in the public domain, or to people who criticize them on other platforms like Alex Jones, and you'll find that they don't hide their intentions for what the future will look like. They try to justify their agenda by claiming that it's for the good of the planet. And of course, on YouTube, they are correct. Now, Lucas Golder from the GFS.Bern Research Institute said that while this set of rejected environmental measures is popular among much of the left, there is no such appetite for such drastic proposals across the wider population. A higher proportion of voters rejected the measures than polls suggested ahead of Sunday. Not surprising because polls usually lean left. Golder's comments suggested that had the turnout been higher than 38%, which is fairly low by Swiss standards, the margin against would have been greater still. Who's surprised by this? All the pushes for social justice have been funded by states secretly, like with the USAID thing, and by large corporations. They are not grassroots. People do not enjoy them. People do not support them. And let's be honest, without them secretly using your taxpayer money to propagandize you and to ban you if you so dissent against their narratives, they would never have the support that they do. So many more people are convinced of these narratives simply because nobody is allowed to articulate the other opinion. It's that simple. Now, the European Commission is basically giving in to pressure from the Greens to tighten the European Union's climate laws despite ever-growing resistance from the member states. The President Ursula von der Leyen last year made a promise to the Greens to modify the European climate law if they support her re-election as head of the Commission. The Greens said they want clear and binding target sets for the member states to achieve by 2040. The European climate law writes into legislation the goal set out in the European Green Deal for Europe to become climate neutral, achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The law also sets an intermediate target of reducing emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. In its latest recommendation, the Commission wants to establish yet another intermediate target, a reduction of emissions by at least 90% by 2040. If such a proposal were to be adopted, the requirements would become binding for all member states. Well, at that point, Europe can just kiss its future goodbye. I mean, in 15 years, reducing emissions by 90%. How? Green energy is not dependable, it's not efficient, it's not competitive. It's going to make so many people freeze to death in winter in places like Germany. And we know it. This is an anti-human agenda, in my opinion. And it's such a shame that we're not allowed to talk about any disagreements we have, fears we have, even statistics coming from the government itself that would try to explain to the public our position as the opposition are basically banned in many countries and sometimes in the entire social media landscape. This allows them so much more freedom to enact these plans and to hurt people by these plans than they would otherwise have. And despite all of this, you still see growing opposition everywhere. You still see dirty tricks being employed to stop the right from winning in France or in Romania. They're trying to ban the right wing in Germany and so on. It's just not working. People are not convinced. You're scaring and intimidating them. You're propagandizing them, you're banning them, and still they're not convinced. How can any of this be called democracy? I don't know. If you showed the current situation of the European Union to the average European citizen 20 years ago, they would freak out. They would think this is worse than China. In fact, I do believe that China is less censorious and bans less people and throws less people to jail for social media posts than some European countries right now. I believe that the UK, right, Britain, threw more people in jail for tweets and stuff than China per capita, of course, in the last year. It's gone so far too far. And they still want to keep going. They still want to install facial recognition cameras everywhere. It's just, there is no end to it. There's no point at which they'll be satisfied. You must lose all your rights and freedoms, and you must comply to basically the destruction of your lifestyle in the name of climate protection, and any other action is prohibited and will result in punishment. Now, the right-wing Patriots for Europe group recently urged the right in the European Parliament to join forces to challenge the Green Deal and to take swift, massive and concrete action to protect companies and consumers from the negative effects of climate policies. With the rise of right-wing anti-globalist parties on both sides of the Atlantic, proposals to ditch radical climate policies are becoming a regular occurrence. Germany's likely next chancellor, Friedrich Merz, said he would prioritize revitalizing the economy's industrial base ahead of climate protection, and the two parties attempting to form a government in Austria started their talks by agreeing to reducing subsidies paid out for climate policies. And on Sunday, voters in Switzerland rejected the proposal that I showed you here by quite a margin. Basically 70% voted no. So, is this good news or bad news? You decide. It seems to me that for Europe, hard times are coming, at least in the short term, but in the long term they might have hope because there are forces rising to oppose the authoritarian bureaucracy that has taken over Europe and is trying to dictate a very dark and grim future where overpopulation from mass migration, crime, high energy costs, and so on simply do not leave the people of Europe much hope of making anything of themselves, having a decent life, gainful employment, and so on. They will barely survive, if that, under the current regime. Something must change, otherwise I just can't help but remember when I was 13, I believe, a trip to Paris, to France, and seeing off the beautiful old architecture, and it was such a nice and pleasant place at the time. Compared to the pictures that we see on the internet today, it's day and night difference. And really, it saddens me to think that all of these societies that were peaceful and orderly and safe and productive and created great works of art and mechanical innovation are now reduced to this. And for what? What reason? There was no great upheaval, no tragedy or any sort of plague or anything. There was nothing to cause this other than human stupidity and malice. That's it. That's what happened. If human stupidity and malice caused this, then simply standing up to them might end this. And then maybe things can return to normal. Hopefully. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.